Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Mage, Errant, Book 4, The Lost City of Ithos, chapters 16 through 19, Stormward's Gift, Sphinx Eyes, Constellations, and Oddly Timed Lightning. In these chapters, our friends are dealing with a lot of different types. There's personal conflict, there's very high stakes, like kind of global conflict, and I have to be honest, I am much more invested in the highly personal conflict than in stuff that could affect everyone's lives, because fuck everybody, am I right? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Dan for commissioning this episode. What's up, Dan? So I'm going to save talking about certain parts of this until after I get through the main opening of this this series of chapters, because Stormward's Gift, I've got to be honest, you guys, I completely forgot that Hugh is being called Stormward. So when I saw this title, I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, oh, okay, maybe that's the name of a ship, or, you know, and it turns out it's not. It's a new thing. Well, the place isn't new. It's just been refreshed. It's been renovated. So all of the Radan have been like weirdly secretive and argumentative the past few days on the ship, and nobody's quite sure what's going on, but it turns out that there is a very like important holiday the next day, and that there are conflicting calendars. So the arguing was about trying to figure out when the holiday actually fell on the calendar. And I'm real curious if that's going to be like as much as we find out about it, or if it's going to be a like something that gets dropped casually here and then we find out more about it later. But for now, that's all we get. And there is this like little area off of this island that has a very sheltered bay where they can go and celebrate, because the harbor is like completely unknown to anybody else other than the Radan. And what they intend to do is set up this ward circle so that everything that happens within it is invisible, and then hold the party here in safety. And we get this amazing moment. This fucking killed me all. So Hugh spent a few moments following the curve of the ward the Radhan were constructing, frowning and muttering to himself. Finally, he strode up to the Radhan ship mages, drawing the ward. They were drawing it out of a book, arguing about it as they went. "This," Hugh said, "is one of the worst wards I have ever seen in my life." "Excuse me," one of the mages said, clearly offended. "We've been using this ward for decades. It's a time-tested design, and it's terrible," Hugh said. "It's supposed to be a concealment ward, I take it?" "It is a concealment ward." Can we just stop for a moment here and appreciate how withdrawn and uncertain Hugh becomes such a bitch all of a sudden? He doesn't give a fuck about anybody's feelings here. He is just going to tell you, honey, no, I'm sorry, but those clash really bad and your hair needs help. Not going out of the house like this, okay? Let's get you to a salon ASAP, because this is a tragedy. I can't believe how he doubles down. Like, they're like, excuse me. He said as like clearly offended. And I'm expecting Hugh to be like, oh, I'm sorry, not to be disrespectful. No. He doesn't back off even a little bit. He just fucking, it's terrible. And you know what I like about this is that if you are somebody who's really passionate about something and you see it being done wrong, this can happen. I'm not trying to say that you always leave tact behind, but there are certain things that each of us takes really seriously that aren't necessarily that serious in and of themselves, but we see them as hugely important. And so when someone gets something wrong that in our eyes would be very easy to correct and get right, it just feels like, why wouldn't you just not do it in this shitty way? Why don't you just not? And I felt him so hard on this because of I don't know how often I've talked about this, like, on the show, like, Spoil Me, but people who listen to my other shows are aware. I'm a very good home cook. Okay? Like, I'm very good. I have a real sense of how to put flavors together, what needs what, and I have developed that over time. I was raised learning how to cook from a child. I dated a chef and was engaged to him for a long time, so he showed me some of, like, the professional secrets. And then I went to pastry and baking school and got a lot of, like, actual technical skill. And then worked in restaurants for a little while, which sucked. And I was bad at that. I will say that. I'm a great home cook. Working in restaurants, not awesome. I was not good at it. So I understand cooking, and I understand some of the common mistakes that are made. And even so, when I am cooking with Owen's grandmother, some of the things that she does to food are so absolutely fucking hideous and out of, like, it's the sort of thing that if you showed it to me on television, I would think it was staged because nobody could be that ignorant about a thing. Like that kind of. She was trying to peel an avocado, you guys. Like, not cut around it and then break it open and then cut little bits from the inside with a knife or a spoon or whatever. She was trying to peel the outside of the avocado and it was sliding around. She was peeling it, by the way, with a paring knife. It wasn't even like a vegetable peeler, which would also have been bad, but safe. She was trying to hold this slippery thing and peel the outside of it. And like, she has seen me. I know she has. She has seen me open avocados. I don't know what she was thinking. And then, like, I was talking to her about using garlic in something. This bitch straight up told me she had never used fresh garlic before in her life. She is 73 years old. Never used fresh garlic in her life. When I tell you it took everything in me to not gape like she had just taken her top off in the middle of dinner. I don't think I've ever met anybody who has never used fresh garlic. Like, I never even heard of a person who has just never tried. I said something about adding ginger to something. She asked me, what's that? I mean, truly, guys, it's so bad. And it's like the kind of, I've tried to sort of get her used to some things in my cooking. And so when she asks because she likes it, I'll explain to her a thing that maybe she'll incorporate, you know. But I mean, the first Thanksgiving that we had, I watched this woman trim all the fat off of the turkey, wipe it down, wrap it in a roasting bag, without so much as sprinkling it with salt. She literally didn't even add salt and pepper. And then she just sealed that roasting bag up and roasted that turkey. That very expensive turkey that came out tasting exactly as you would expect it to taste. Truly, that was the moment I understood how, like, what I was dealing with. But when she told me she had never used fresh garlic in her life, that took it to a level that I even then was not fully prepared for. So that cooking is my thing that I take it like personally, because it's just, I'm not trying to say that it doesn't take skill. I am not trying to say that there isn't a barrier to entry in terms of having decent pans and knives and buying quality ingredients. But there are so many things you can do to make cheap food taste better, or make a thing that you're putting a bunch of effort into anyway. Just put in like 2 more minutes and you could have something twice as good. That I find it baffling when people don't do that. And this moment, and Hugh getting in their face and being like, okay, I'm sorry. I can't stand here and watch you guys put that down and be like, we put a ward up. That's not gonna happen in front of my face. I'm sorry. Back away. Let me fucking do it. And I just, oh my God. Okay, Dan is in the chat and he says, I'm here but late. Dan, you got here just after I talked for quite a while. You'll have to rewind and watch about Hugh telling them their ward is garbage and comparing it to me being a really good cook and watching Owen's grandmother cook. Because it's just really tough when you care about something and you're passionate about something to see it being done very badly in an easily preventable way. Especially when they're like arguing while they're putting it together, which feels to me like they're arguing as they put it down because it isn't that great. And like, it's like they're not quite realizing that there's something to argue about due to the fact that this ward is full of holes and inconsistencies and things that don't like quite cover all the bases. So it's like, you know, it's just like watching people argue about whether they should put cinnamon or cloves into an apple pie. And you're just like, you do the both. You both it. What are you doing? So yeah, he comes in here and they're like, what do you know? Which is completely fair. And I'm sure when I start to get pushy about cooking, Owen's 73-year-old grandmother also wants to look at me and go, how the fuck do you know? Because I'm an infant in comparison. But I'm an infant who has used fresh garlic in my cooking since I was 12. And she had never used it until last year. So I think I get to be a little bit like, maybe I know more than you. Okay? So what Hugh, when they're like, how the fuck do you know? He finally embraces his title and is like, I don't know if you've heard of me. Stormward? Ring a bell? Yeah. That's me. He doesn't sound like that at all, but he could, and I still wouldn't be mad at him for that. It's a very satisfying moment. And then he explains to them how it works and shows them all of the things that their old ward didn't do and how he has built it into this one and the various extras that he has also thrown in, and how it's not only covering so much more in terms of like camouflaging things regarding sound and light, but also a lot more efficient so they don't just need a mage constantly powering it all night long, which was the thing they were going to otherwise have to do. And Hugh has to sort of think about the fact that he earned this title. And as much as he tries to tell himself he's happy being Hugh of Emblem, he steps back and realizes, actually, I don't like just being Hugh of Emblem. That guy sucks. Not like that guy sucks, but, you know, it was what he always was known for, of like, you're a mage from a place with no mages. It's just like, I can only imagine having that conversation over and over again must get really tiring. You know, it's like me when I do anything around people I am just meeting and they ask, what do you do for a living? And I have to explain first that I'm a podcaster, and a lot of people don't even know what that is. And then I have to explain what my podcast is, and like the fact that, yes, I make a living off it. And the whole thing is like, it's just the same conversation over and over. And some people take it seriously, some people don't, and you just don't want to fucking deal with it. You don't always want to do it. So he manages to do this whole thing. They're very impressed with it. And it's fun because later at the party, somebody comes up to him and is like, look, I know we're at a party, so maybe you don't want to do this, but I would like to talk about wards. And he was like, my brother in Christ, there is literally no time that I don't want to talk about wards. Like, it just doesn't happen. So yeah, let's get some drinks. So he does this, and then he gets his friends involved, and they do all kinds of other like little improvements to this area and make the like stone that it's built on stronger. They put some, what do you call them? Some ladders in place that are like sort of hidden from things. Talia had carved a series of caves into the mudstone layer using dream fire. That process had sent lambent smoke, melting ice butterflies, and unpleasant sounds into the harbor. The caves could be used for emergency shelter, storage, or whatever purpose the Radhen saw fit. And they also have like benches and a little road. The whole thing is just extremely... they're leveling up this place to a point where leveling up, it sounds like you're only leveling up one. They're going from base level to like, 20 levels up. It's the sort of thing like when you first start a video game and leveling up is really easy at first. That's what they're doing, is like they're putting any effort into it, and then it gets just so exponentially better so quickly. And the Radhen are thrilled with it, and they're talking of like what to call it. And Sabe is like, how about Stormward's gift? And they're like, yeah, dope. Sounds amazing. And Hugh at first is like, ew, what? You told him to name it after me? I don't want that. And then he stops and he's like, actually, I guess that does kind of like feed into her family's reputation too, which makes him feel better. And then we get this like moment that I liked a lot. It honestly didn't bother him that Sabe tended to have multiple motives for everything she did. Hugh genuinely trusted that she meant the best for him and the others. And it wasn't like he, Talia, or Godric were any good at scheming or politics. I really like this, the acknowledgement that like, yeah, she does have multiple motives for things. There's layers to the moves that she makes. And also, I just trust her. So she can do that, and I'm not going to fucking worry about it. It's, that means something. So he gets thanked over and over again. Then we go to chapter 17. And Hugh goes back to his room, and he pulls himself up onto the bunk. And he's like, I am going to do some reading. And this is really interesting. He opens his book and tries to get the text of a novel that he apparently fed to it. He's like really doing this feeding his book other books thing pretty much on the regular now. And it's mentioned that bestiary, which is humongous, he hasn't attempted to get it to like digest because it seemed too big. And I'm like, bruh, just break it into parts. Just rip some pages out and do it little by little, man. It's fine. You think we can eat a Thanksgiving turkey all in one sitting? No. You have your big meal at first, and then you make sandwiches and soup. You know, pick at it, boil up them bones. So he opens it, and then he sees Candoran's handwriting. Lasnaborn is dead. The handwriting that responded to her was graceful and precise, each letter flowing into the next. Was it the current Candace ruler? No, it wasn't Ilinia, and it is astonishing that you cannot bother yourself to learn the name of a mage that could so easily defeat you in battle, and that even I would be hard-pressed against. I am sure she could, but she's still just one of the ephemerals. She'll pass away of old age soon enough. Besides, I'm most of the way across the continent from her, and we have no reason to clash, not least because she's part of your... What did the Havathi call it? Your coven? Your complacency will be your undoing someday, Kieja. You've claimed that for centuries, and it hasn't come true. So then who is it? Who do you think? Lasnaborn was warned about his diet. Again and again. Those of us old enough to remember warned him to change it. Even Leviathans and Kraken are not so foolhardy as he is. Lasnaborn might have been old, but only in comparison to humans and dragons. He was a hatchling the last time they were on Anastas. You remember how powerful they are. The council is divided, and we cannot trust them to tell us everything. Half of them oppose our purpose. Besides, I personally visited Lasnaborn's island just 2 days past. I saw them offshore, Kieda. They may bear us no ill will, nor even much interest, but we must watch them nonetheless. If they begin to depart again so soon after arrival, we will know our fears are coming true. We must watch and see whether they are the harbingers of their greater kin's arrival, or are merely here to evacuate their lesser kin from the coming of the... And then it ends. And this whole conversation is very clearly not something that Hugh was intended to see. Or is it? I'm going to go with no, it wasn't. But there's a part of me that's like, is she just like letting him have little bits of information on purpose? But I don't think so. I just don't think that tends to be how she works. She seems pretty direct. But I don't know. And Hugh is like sitting there thinking about trying to memorize what it was that he just read. And I'm an idiot thinking, well, Brad, just write it down. And almost immediately, as I'm thinking this, he's like, he wasn't going to be stupid enough to write it down. And I was like, oh, yeah, good point. He didn't dare recopy it into his spellbook. Accidentally eavesdropping of one of Candoran's private conversations was bad enough, but recording it? No, thank you. And, I mean, you could write it not into your spellbook, but that's super insecure. So what good would that really do, you know? So I see his point. But yeah, so Kieda is a lich. And it says, I'm trying to find the spot. Oh yeah, here it is. If you remembered correctly, the phoenix nested in the islands southwest of the Ithonian continent. Over the last couple of years, he'd come to realize that the bestiary was, at least in part, a guide to the great powers of the Ithonian continent. It was where he had first learned of Kieja Lasnaborn and many other great powers, but he had doubted his spellbook could digest the book. He was racking his brain, trying to remember more details about Kieja and Lasnaborn, while also trying desperately to commit every detail of the message to memory. What was the council, the coven? Who had just returned to Anastas, and from where? And what had Candoran been about to say when his access was cut off? So, he's in the middle of this, and then Talia comes in and she's like, hey, are you asleep? And he's kind of puzzled and he's like, no, I'm reading. And she's like, you're what? I'm reading. And she's like standing there for a second and she's like, with what? And he says, with my eyes. So she has to be like, dude, there is no light. It's fucking pitch black in here. How are you reading? And he doesn't know what she's talking about. So she goes and gets their friends and is like, does this seem like a well-lit room to you? And they're like, yeah, no, this is super dark. Hugh, are you using a cantrip or something? Like, what do you mean? And then a Lustin comes in and turns the light off and flashes a light really quickly in Hugh's eye. And they see that eye shine that like nocturnal animals get. That sort of red reflection. He's basically doing like a Riddick here, a Chronicles of Riddick type thing. Everybody seen Pitch Black? Oh, yeah. It's a good movie. So what Lustin is saying is that he thinks Hugh is beginning to get Sphinx eyes, which it's surprising to me that Talia is like, he pacted with this like huge, powerful being and that's all he got. And I was like, I don't know, Talia, that feels pretty good to me. Like, you're throwing it out there like it's not really a big deal, but I feel like that's kind of important. And also, you asked, so she said something like, are you reading with some sort of night vision cantrip? And then interrupts herself sort of and is like, is there even such a thing? So the fact that you don't know that there is such a thing means that it's not a hugely common thing that he would be able to find a spell to do easily, which means that this seems even more helpful, if that thought made sense. And Lustin says Sphinx eyes also have incredible distance vision, impressive ability to make out small objects close up, and significantly improved color vision as well. Sphinxes have some of the best overall vision. And I am really like interested in the increased color vision as well. I have excellent color sight. Like, I'm trying to think of how to say this. So you guys know about that whole, is the dress blue and black, or is it white and gold, right? And I immediately could tell it was a black and blue dress that was under bright sunlight. There is, and this was something that like I found out in, I think it was high school, that I was really good with color. I can tell when lighting is what's affecting the color tone in something without there being context in the picture, if that makes sense. So if you go to like eBay and you see a photo taken of an object that you're looking for and it looks a certain way, and then you go to another photo and it looks like it's a slightly different color in that photo, I'm really good at looking at those and being like, this one had this kind of lighting and that's why the color looks like this. This photo is the more accurate of the two because this is closer to natural light, and you can tell because. So that's always been something that I have. It's been weird when I've been around people who aren't good at that. And my mom, I think, is actually a little bit colorblind. She'll call things green when they're definitely blue. And the, blue and black versus white and gold debate was really frustrating to me because I was like, there's just an objectively right answer. It's a black and blue dress. Like, you can go find it on the internet. So everybody insisting that it's white and gold, it was just like, this is not a matter of opinion. It's literally, there is a right and wrong answer and y'all are just wrong. So I'm wondering, like, Dan, that dress is white and gold and I will die on that hill. Dan came to the wrong fucking house with this. Go find the dress and stop lying to yourself. But yeah, the idea of there being like better color sight. I am really curious what exactly that means, like how that manifests. Because there are certainly more colors on the spectrum than what we humans can see. I don't know how you talk about that, though, in a book where your audience is human and has only seen so many colors. Like, you know what I'm saying? So we'll see what happens with that. So, chapter 18. They are having this party and everybody is about to wear formal wear, which Hugh actually enjoys wearing quite a bit. He calls it social armor, which definitely understand that. Definitely get that. And there's a lot of dancing and we jump from like a couple different POVs. So Sabe she's having this thing. So Sabe's bi or pan. And, she's struggling here. It's really funny because Sabe is realizing that it's one thing to, like, manipulate people from the outside and judge them acting like fools and idiots, because you're able to do that when you don't have a personal stake in the outcome. And all of it seems like a given to you, the third party, whom this does not affect. It's a very different thing when you're the one that's sort of under the microscope and everybody seems to be hyper aware of your situation. Everybody is telling her that this this pair of people who are apparently on again, off again couple themselves, that they're both into her and that she has to like choose between them. More than one person tells her that, and it's obviously making her kind of uncomfortable that she's under a bit of a microscope with this. And there's this, let's see, where is it? I'm trying to find the spot where, okay, your dad plays music, Sabe said. Because Artur had just been here. And Talia says, how does he know about me and Hugh? I don't even know exactly what it is that he said that made her think he knows about me and Hugh. What is that? Where is that moment? I don't see him say anything. I'm thinking that it's just like the expression on his face or something. But anyway, Sabe is just like, dude, everybody but Hugh knows. Like, you're very obvious. It's not a secret. So, just kind of like be aware of the fact that literally everybody has figured this out already. I like that multiple times in this section, Talia gets irritated and goes to like kick Sabe or punch Hugh and stops herself. You know what that's called? Growth. Appreciate you, Talia. And Sabe goes off to talk to these two, and Del is there. He's the one whose life she saved. And it's an interesting thing. She starts off thinking, like, he looks so relaxed for somebody who nearly died very recently. But later on, he confides to her that he has panic attacks when he's, like, near the railing of the ship, and that he's considering getting moved to a sand ship instead, because his experience just fucked him up so bad that he feels like he's not going to be able to handle the ocean. And he's sort of hoping that will pass. But obviously he's like affecting ease here that he doesn't fully feel. And he says all of this and sort of like couches it in, I'm sure you think that's really weak. Like he is sort of shit talking himself, and she has to be like, hey, this thing happened to me with magma, and now I have like a real kind of flashbacky thing going on myself. And clearly it like means something to him that they're able to connect in this way and that she isn't judging him for that. I am not entirely certain what Dell's deal is, but it seems pretty clear to me that he is a prospect that Sabe should be paying more attention to. I don't know how seriously she's taking this, because I just don't, like, it feels very, for Sabe, like she's just kind of stretching her legs and getting the feel for dating and what it's about. But I feel like she seems to have pretty good chemistry with him on a personal level. They're able to confide in each other and have this experience together. That feels like it's really saying its own thing right here. And she's sitting there thinking about how she couldn't understand why she was this nervous just because of a couple of pretty faces. She'd observed other people dating enough to know it wasn't that complicated. People just liked to make idiots of themselves. Oh, Sabe. It's just really funny because she's in the middle of making an idiot out of herself. And she's like, as she's doing it, saying, why do people make, and it's like, do you not see that this is why the nerves you're feeling are why? Why are you not putting this together, babe? It's really not that deep. Like, you're acting like it's so puzzling. You're literally in it. You're sweating and shaking and nervy. This is it. This is why. So anyway, this like little back and forth, Dell says something about how both Yara and Talon are into her and have been talking about her. And we find out later that she like kisses both of them, but then totally freaks out and like bails in the middle of the party and lands in the ocean because she does one of those sort of wind jump things and she's drunk. So she misses the ship. And that's so embarrassing. She tries to call it a cunning escape attempt, which is amazing. And I appreciate too that she tells Dell a bunch of the things that she has gone through, and his eyes get really wide and she realizes how over the top all of her adventures might sound. But I like that she leads with this because part of the thing that went wrong with Ava and Hugh was that she wasn't really interested in that kind of high stress life and didn't know how consistent a thing this was probably going to be for all of them. If she's going to get serious with Dell, him knowing that this is what her life is like off the top is probably a good thing. So yeah, let's see. He does a thing where he like tries to help her choose by asking for help getting back to his cabin and pulling Talon away so that Yara is left and they go dance together. But again, I'm just kind of feeling like Dell is really the object that we should be focused on here. So then we go to Talia, and she is trying so hard to like find an opening here. And it's interesting because whenever we go to different POVs, everybody is making bets about whether Talia is going to be able to get the nerve up to talk to Hugh. And it's very clear when we're in her head, as much as she's nervous, she wants to get it over with at this point. Like there's a feeling of everybody knows by now, and I feel like I'm being watched because of that. So I would rather just yank the Band-Aid off, you know? So she's watching Hugh at one point, and the fucking spellbook is trying to eat coals and spit them at children so that it becomes a dragon. But anyway, Talia goes after him, and we have this like conversation between her and Hugh that's really, really sweet. He's sitting by himself. She comes to sit next to him. Sorry, guys, if you can, that's my next door dog. It's not my dog. And she drinks out of this wine skin. Wow, she drinks really fast, kind of a lot, and is clearly trying to shore up her courage. And she asks him about why he didn't notice he was developing night vision. And he says something about how like he's not that observant, and she sort of snorts and is like, noticed. And then she asks him, how are you feeling about Lothal? And he's like, what do you mean? And she says, that guy you killed, it was weighing on you a lot. And recently you haven't really talked about it, but I'm sort of worried about you. I act like I'm fine with that because I have gone through battle and seen death. And, you know, to a degree, I am okay, but I'm not as okay with it as I act like I am. And I know that it was your first time, and is it still bothering you? And I felt like this was a pretty good way, like as much as it's sort of not at all the topic she intended to open with, it really works as a means of getting Hugh to be vulnerable in a way that invites the topic later on in the conversation in what is a surprisingly natural progression. And Hugh says that the thing he's sort of preoccupied by with this is that he doesn't know what the person even looked like. He doesn't know anything about them. He doesn't know that if they had a family, if anybody even cares that they're gone, like just everything that made them a person, basically. Which, this is a really fascinating concept because, you know, there are plenty of people out there, especially in the way that we fight wars nowadays, that are trained to engage in the kind of warfare where you're not really like face to face with your enemy. And this paragraph from Hugh makes me feel like the author has spoken to somebody who has felt this. It was so specific. You know what I mean? It just felt like it's something that he had a real conversation about. And he talks about how difficult it has been because he really only talks to Candoron about it, but he feels like he's sort of like taking advantage of her or boring her or whatever. And she's like, you can talk to me. And he says, yeah, but you know, you had your stress going on. You just had to cut all of your hair off. And I know you don't really like Ava, so I didn't want to talk about her to you because I didn't want you to get frustrated. And he said, it's felt so hard to ask even more from any of you lately. Like I need to try and balance things out and do more for all of you before asking even more from you. Which, that was a really good way of saying this. This is something that I didn't realize until kind of recently that I struggle with, is being a burden in friendships. And it's not like, it's sort of a weird way that this can manifest depending on what your personality is. But for me, I don't like displaying vulnerable emotions in front of friends in person because I always feel like I'm putting somebody on the spot and making them perform labor because of my emotions. And I feel like I am demanding, you know? And so this is why a lot of the time I either cry by myself or I'll cry in front of Owen, or I will cry on the podcast where there is a very safe distance and I don't feel like there's any, you know, people come to the podcast to hear my response to things. So it feels a lot more safe because that's part of my response and that's part of the package. And that feels like there's some distance in that as well. But when it's like face to face with friends, and even with Owen sometimes, like I let loose with him more than anybody, but I will have a hard time doing that with him sometimes too. It's just, I think that also intellectually I get really caught up because feeling your feelings and intellectualizing your feelings are total opposites. And I'm a person who analyzes stuff. So I like talk about how I'm feeling and I convince myself that is feeling my feelings. but it's not. It's just discussing them. And that's not the same thing. So I'll like have a whole conversation and walk away feeling like a real grown up, but I didn't deal with them. Not really, because the feeling is super messy and I don't like the mess. I don't like the open-endedness of that, you know? So anyway, this whole conversation, his book brings her an apology gift of like half a dead mackerel because he saw a shark eating it and the shark reminded the book of Talia. Real weird moment. She kicks the mackerel off the cliff and just says, "Go away, book." And it just goes off looking dejected. And I was like, you could have been a little nicer, but also it did cause you to lose your hair. So I guess I get it. So finally she says, this is priceless, you guys. "I didn't hate Ava." And he was like, "You don't have to lie." And she says, "No, I didn't. I was jealous of her." And she names all these reasons why. And then, "I was jealous of your relationship with her." He was silent for a moment as he tried to process that. "You had a crush on Ava?" he said. You guys, a lot of times I have these moments where I'm like expecting a joke. So even when it lands, I appreciate it, but I saw it coming. This one caught me off guard. Him saying you had a crush on Ava. I really fell out laughing. Like, it didn't even enter my head that he would take it that way, but it feels like that is kind of what she said because she phrased it kind of confusingly. So him like hearing that, just the fact that it's confusingly phrased and how he just, of course, doesn't think she has a crush on him. Like, that's just not gonna be it. It makes so much sense. And finally she's like, "Not her, you idiot. You. I had a crush on you." And he doesn't know what to say. And at first she's just like, "You know what? I should just go. I'm really sorry to like drop that on you." And he pulls her back and is like, "No, I just don't know what to say because I never thought of you romantically." And at first she's hurt. And he's like, wait. That makes it sound like it's because you were flawed in some way that would preclude it. It's not that. It was simply that I value the friendship of you three so much. I basically put you in an off-limits category where I wouldn't look at that or consider that as an option because it's so volatile. And I really, really want you guys as my friends and in my life forever. So I wasn't going to fuck with the formula, basically. And when he asks how long, she says, since the whole thing where she broke his wards down and yelled at him, and he just forgave her. Because she sort of thought maybe he would try to prove something or get one over on her or lord it over her. And he doesn't do any of that. He just forgives her and moves on. And she thinks that was like the beginning of it all. And there's another silence. And she says, "You're thinking of a way to let me down gently." And he's like, "No, I'm just trying to figure this out." And when he says, "I couldn't risk it. I can't lose any of you. I can't lose you, Talia." Hugh realized his hands were shaking, and then suddenly Talia was squeezing him so hard he could barely breathe. "I'll always be your friend, Hugh," Talia said. "That's never going to change. Ever." And he says finally, "I guess I just need to think, and I know that won't be fun for you, because that sucks. You're just waiting. But my brain is too mixed up." And she's like, "Okay, I'm going to go and, let you have the night to yourself." This thing, like, we'll always be friends. I really want to believe it, but that is said so often. And people mean it. And it doesn't work a lot of the time. You want it to work. You mean well. And on paper, there's no reason it shouldn't work. But it doesn't. a lot of the time it doesn't. I mean, Brendan and I always said that no matter what happened, even if we got divorced, we'd still be friends. And that just absolutely is not the case at all. And that's due to mistakes I made. It's not like I'm blaming him for that. But it happened, and we both couldn't conceive of a situation in which we wouldn't still be friends. And then one happened. It's just sort of how life is. You just can't predict everything. So I understand Hugh's fears around that. And her saying, I'll be your friend forever anyway. Like, yeah, I'm sure you mean that. But it is a risk. You know, it just is. So then we go to chapter 19, Oddly Timed Lightning. We start off with Talia, who is literally hiding from Hugh. She says she's not. She is. She's like making sure that he can't hear her footsteps and stuff, hiding in cupboards. And she winds up like going up into the Drake's nest on the ship. And Sabe is up there. She's hiding from the two people that she kissed. And the woman up there tells them that Talon and Yara date and break up every few months. I do think that they liked you, but I think they were also trying to make each other jealous. And I kind of appreciated this because once again, Sabe is like, God damn it, I was being kind of played. I am sick of this. This keeps happening. But yeah, there's some talk about them like each being from families that sort of have a little bit of rivalry, but it's not like a serious thing. And let's see, I'm trying to find the spot. Oh yeah, here it is. She says when Sabe says, did you talk to Hugh last night? And Talia says, yeah. Really? Yes. Seriously? Yes, Sabe. About your feelings for him or something totally unrelated? About my feelings. Wait, really? Yes, really? Do you not believe me? And everybody apparently didn't. Like the bet that Artur and Alestin make is that Artur says she's going to kiss Hugh and then run away, and it's going to be real awkward for like 3 weeks, and Alestin thinks she's just going to like keep chickening out. So they both lost. Ha ha. And Rena says, I'm cheering for you, and no offense, but your friend Hugh seems a bit broken. Talia glowered off into space. I pretty regularly fantasize about paying Hugh's family and Emblem a visit, and not a friendly one. They're monsters worse than the ones we've faced down in the labyrinth, if you ask me. You're not the only one, Sabe muttered. Godric and I have discussed the logistics of the expedition in detail. The main problem is keeping Hugh from noticing our absence for a couple months. And I love this. I don't advocate it, but I really get it. And it's just the sort of thing like, you know, ring the bell for mentioning Harry Potter. But I wouldn't have minded if Ron and Hermione had decided to go over to the Dursleys and just slap them across the face a couple times just for the fun of it. That would have been, in my opinion, supportive friendship. And I have friends who have been put through it by parents in such a way that it is a struggle for me to see them with their parents in a social context and believe that there is any good reason for them to be talking to that parent anymore. And it's like, I know people's relationships with their parents are complicated, but I want to go in there and like rescue them from that immediate interaction and just be like, you don't have to talk to them. You know that, right? And I really struggle with this with Owen's parents. His father died, which honestly, good. His parents completely abandoned him, and he was raised by his grandparents while his parents lived literally 2 blocks away and never came to see him. They were trash. And it has been very hard going to holiday dinners and stuff with them and hearing them talking about one time his father even said something about how so-and-so isn't raising their kid right. And I nearly hit the ceiling. It's just like, who do you think I don't know? And you get real protective of people you care about, and you see the damage someone inflicted on them and how it lasts. You know, that trauma just stays and people have to cope, and you want to fix it, and you can't fix it. You just want to go and beat somebody up, and that doesn't solve anything, but you want it. So then we go to the whole thing with the storm that's coming on, and a bunch of water serpents that are attacking, and everything is like kind of out of control here. And we wind up in Artur's POV, I think for the very first time, if I'm not mistaken. In the midst of all of this, Talia gets really sick again. She didn't have seasickness on the ocean, which was nice, but the storm, understandably, it takes it to another level. There's some discussion about how the scent stone that Godric made is helping to soak up the smell of her vomit, and it's growing really gross on the inside, but it can still work until it's totally full, and then it has to be very carefully disposed of. And I was sort of like, does it have to be carefully disposed of, or will it now be a weapon of its own? Because I could see this sort of thing being quite effective if you broke it. Like if you put it in, for example, a slingshot and sent it somewhere far away, ensuring it would break. I'm just wondering if that would be a good weapon. So let's see. Oh, here it is. Artur was exhausted, physically, yes, but even more so emotionally. Part of him had forgotten how much he'd once loved the sea, and the camaraderie of working together alongside other sailors to fight through a storm. Part of him was in constant terror. Artur had to keep fighting to remind himself that he wasn't on the Hydra's kiss again, that he didn't need to be on constant guard, that he was safe from everything but the storm around them. No matter how hard he pushed against them, though, his fears wouldn't go away. But the rising cormorant was just a ship, not the mad ruin of a woodlich that had been ambitious enough to try and make a ship its demesne, whose mind had fragmented at being forced into a demesne too small for it. The rising cormorant had no vicious illusionist for a captain, as mad as her ship, who delighted in trapping her sailors in nauseating, terrifying visions at the least sign of insubordination. The rising cormorant had no decks stained with blood. It was a merchant vessel, not a pirate ship. And I'm just like, that sounds fucking hideous. No wonder this dude is traumatized and doesn't like to be on the sea anymore. And I'm under the impression he hasn't talked about any of this to Godric. I don't think Godric knows any details. And in this way, Artur kind of reminds me of my dad. My dad went through some real shit. He was a guerrilla fighter in Colombia growing up, rebelling against the police and the government. And he took part in some really horrific shit that he never talked about. But he would have nightmares. He would have weird reactions to stuff. And occasionally little stories would like leak out here and there. And it would be just a fragment of the full picture. But it was like enough to know he really carried that with him. And it was part of why he became a born-again Christian, because he had so much guilt, because he had killed people. I remember when I was younger not getting it, and I asked, have you ever killed anyone? And he just looked at me and then said, you ask too many questions. I tell you what, that was a real scary moment. he just always had this feeling of violence simmering right below the surface. And like it was just barely kept under control. And occasionally it would leak out. But he didn't talk about it. And I think about it and I like get why he didn't. A big part of his faith was leaving the past in the past and trying to like act as if you were a complete, fresh, new person. But I wish he had. I wish I knew more. I don't really know if that would have done anything for our relationship, but you know what I mean? It's the sort of thing that he's gone and all of that is gone with him. And the whole sense here of like the trauma that he underwent and maybe some of the things that he did they're haunting Artur. And he is such a good, understanding guy, but hasn't talked about it, I don't think, to Godric at all. And I wonder what that would do to their relationship. And he's like, the thing that's kind of triggering him in this moment is the knowledge that this storm that they're experiencing is not a natural storm. It's very clear somebody is targeting them and he can't figure out who it could be. He knows a lot of folks that could do it, but none of them they're either not in the right like area of the country to like reach them, or they just don't have the motive to do it. And it ends really abruptly. And the word unnatural, there's a couple instances in this section again of the same word being used really close together over and over. This one stuck out to me. The back end of the storm ended unnaturally smoothly, and Artur shuddered at the unnatural sight. Not awesome. But I like that this storm, that it's like understood and everybody is aware that shit isn't normal. So that is the end of chapter 19. Yeah, Dan in the chat. Holy shit, your dad was hardcore. He really was. You learn a bit more about Hugh's family next book, and it will make you even more angry. Oh, boy. Artur's surprisingly functional after that experience. Yeah. This is the thing that's sort of interesting about trauma. There's that old, like, Russian saying, the same hot water that softens the potato will harden the egg. Basically, people go through experiences that are near identical, and depending on who they are, come out completely different. And my dad, his experience hardened him very, very much and made it difficult to create a relationship. And it seems like Artur managed to go in a different direction. And I'm kind of jealous of that, to be honest. All right, I'm going to wrap up, but thank you, Dan, again for commissioning this and looking forward to next week. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.